right, good evening, everybody. Good morning for those who are joining us from the US. I welcome you very much on behalf of Global Sustainability Exchange. I would like to all mute yourself so that we can have a good discussion and a program flow without any interference. It's lovely to see so many people from all over the world. My name is Mitch Gelber. I come originally from a very small village in Germany. I now live in the Philippines with my family, and I'll be hosting tonight our session, the ROI of green and healthy buildings. I'm very much looking forward to this event tonight because very often people perceive that green and healthy buildings are too expensive. The ROI takes too long. And tonight we will hear from real life case studies, from actual real experiences, as well with the intention to really capture how can we measure the return on investment, how can we fast track it, what are the low or zero cost solutions to make it happen. So welcome to all of you. Tonight is a night of learning, of experiencing hopefully some light bulb moments where we suddenly realize, wow, this is a great idea. I really love to pick up on that and implement it in the future. So I would like to introduce very, very briefly our first speaker, Marie Aguilar. She is the Director of Operation in the Europe International Well-Building Institute. And she is going to present to us today on the subject of the well-building standard and the ROI of healthy buildings. So Anne-Marie, welcome to you today, and let me hand over to you. You can share your presentation slides, and we are really looking forward to your input tonight.
Great, thank you, Matthias. And let me know if you can see my screen. Does everything look good?
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the well building standard and the ROI of healthy buildings. A little bit about myself. I am, sorry, let me see if I can get this slide too. As Matthias said, I'm in charge of the Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa region for the International Well Building Institute. And a little bit more information about the well building standard. We've been in development since 2014. We've relatively quickly became a global rating system for healthy buildings. We now have over 62 million square meters in 62 countries, and really seeing the opportunity to provide the chance to talk about the return on investment as a really important discussion for both sustainability and healthy buildings. And I think, this slide came out in 2004 and then reappeared in 2014 and really started putting some incredible focus on the investment in people that we have inside our buildings. 90% of the spend that happens inside a building is for the salary and benefits of the occupants. So we really need to think cleverly and carefully about what actually increases the health of those inhabitants and what really starts to impact their daily life and their productivity. So just a bit of background regarding the IWBI and where we've come from. We obviously realize that there's a tremendous amount of research that's happening across buildings, specifically in design, human health, and in business, but the opportunity to really bring those three silos together gives us an opportunity to really look at the impact on the human body of the design of buildings. We mentioned that 90% of the cost inside a building is of the occupants, but we also understand that we're spending 90% of our time inside buildings, and that was before the COVID lockdown. And our human body was never really designed to be sitting indoors with artificial light and closed windows. So really, when you start to ask the questions again, if we're designing buildings or we're refurbishing buildings, what is the public health research and what's the industry-led research that's telling us what can actually improve the health of our human body, and how does that impact the spaces that we live in, work in, and play in. So I think there's some time here. I've got 2 reports that I think Matthias is going to be sending out links to the entire audience, but really important if we want to start doing a bit of background research on the interconnectivity of both planetary health and human health. There's some great resources out there, and that's the Better Places for People campaign that started early in 2014 by the World Green Building Council. You'll see some incredibly interesting case studies where they're really starting to provide KPIs that we can look at and understand where this return on investment can come from. The second report that I'll identify is the Urban Land Institute's report, which is entitled The Business Case for Healthy Buildings. Now, really interesting, within both reports, we're actually going to touch upon a couple of those case studies today, but we're really looking at, again, very similar to the 10 concepts in WELL, what are the really important criteria that we need to be thinking about and focusing on when we're either doing a new building or we're redesigning an existing building. Especially now in the light of COVID-19, we're starting to understand the importance and the priorities that we need to associate with things like ventilation, air quality, cleanliness, cleaning protocols. So really, the elements that we were talking about 6 years ago are now starting to come back into focus and really providing us with a real sort of benchmark to say, you know, it might have been a nice to have in the past, but now we're looking at it absolutely being mandatory for going forward. So let's take you through a couple of project profiles. This is a project that was based in Boston in the US, and we're looking at around 12,000 square feet. And a lot of our early adopters within the WELL building program were consultants that wanted to be really understanding the benefit between sustainability and health. So therefore, encouraging their own office to be able to walk the talk and deploy these sorts of principles. So looking at what they've decided to do, and one of the key concepts that we talk about within the WELL building standard is around nutrition. And how do we start designing spaces so that we can provide healthy places for people to eat? And not only is eating healthy nutritional food important, but creating social spaces where people can actually talk to another worker, be able to enjoy downtime, move away from eating at the desk. These are things that not only have an impact on our human body when it comes to nutrients, but also affects the mental health around social connectivity. So just to give, to start seeing how we're building and tracking these KPIs, we wait probably around 12 months and we start going into the companies that we've deployed the WELL building standard, and we start looking at post-occupancy evaluations. And I'm sure we'll get into a very interesting debate around what are the right metrics for POEs. But we are starting to see that it's not just the word productivity, but we can start providing better analytics around productivity. So customer satisfaction, collaborative work, increased productivity are starting to be able to be numerically codified, so we can start to understand what that means in terms of a value. We know and can actually monitor that people are taking fewer sick days. This is a huge opportunity to, again, provide the rational KPI or the financial benefit of this impact. Better sleep. If you look back at some of the major disasters in the world, most of them have come from poor sleep and poor cognition. So we are now seeing metrics around better sleep quality. Better sleep quality means better attention and better alertness in the office. So we are starting to change what have been our older metrics in terms of occupancy evaluation. The next project that I want to briefly walk you through is the Cundall office in London, which was our first project in Europe and in the UK back in 2016. Again, very medium-sized office plate, 16,000 square feet. But you're going to now see a movement around biophilia, and really understanding the human connection with nature has now really sprung to the top of the discussion. This revolves around green space inside a building, views to the outside. Biophilia as the subject matter is really talking about the ability to connect with natural materials. And all of those areas are having an impact on the indoor air quality. So what are we again seeing? We're seeing measurable reduction in absenteeism. For this company, 20% of a reduced absenteeism is a product that, in combination with their reduced turnover, was able to bring them close to 250,000 pounds per year in financial savings. So again, besides the reduction in absenteeism, they're seeing a reduction in staff turnover. So we can start to find the numerics around what does it cost to replace a new staff member? So if we're having a reduction in turnover, how does that impact our entire bottom line? The third project I wanted to run by is the American Society for Interior Designers, which is in New York, Washington, D.C. This was one of the first projects that we certified that was achieving both LEED and WELL. So we're seeing a lot of projects that are looking for dual certification. Again, we're starting to talk about the topics that are affecting quality of sleep. So the right to light. What is the opportunity to change the employees' day-to-day lifestyle by changing the light quality so that their sleep quality is improved? We also started to see, again, increases in productivity, but a decrease in absenteeism. And for this company, they felt that the recuperation of their investment would come to them as quickly as 5 years, halfway into their 10-year lease period. I also wanted to say that we're really interested in and happily supporting the ongoing work in post-occupancy evaluations. So we are working very closely with the Leaseman Index, also with the Building User Survey, to really start understanding how do we build more quantifiable, not qualitative results. So really, how are we trying to measure the impacts of things like thermal comfort, access to nature, sleep performance? So we're really seeing an incredible benefit pre and post certification to really look at how these spaces are enhancing their feeling about coming back to work. The next slide I wanted to talk through, or case study, has to do with Land Securities, a fairly large developer here in London, who also did both a certification standard with BREEAM and with WELL. So again, we're seeing very, very strong reactions here for dual certification, planetary and human health certification. Here we're starting to talk about really moving away from sedentary behavior. So what are the opportunities we can do in the design environment to get people moving? So sit-stand desks, some of the treadmill desks, or encouraging more of an activity-based working just to get people moving around the building. An interesting outcome that these folks saw was that there was a reduction in internal email traffic. So designing a space with open plan working allowed people to actually minimize email traffic and actually get up and go and speak to someone. And face-to-face collaboration not only helped productivity, but it also increases creativity. The next project is here in the UK, but in the north part of the country in Manchester. Again, another engineering company who's looking to walk the talk and be able to kind of show to their prospective clients the type of work that they're doing. We see a lot of impact within employee satisfaction. And I quickly wanted to, I know I'm running close to my time. I'm trying to be very efficient, Matthias, but I wanted to also take some time to talk about what's happening in the sort of post-COVID world and how are we starting to address getting people back to work. And one of the commitments that we had immediately after lockdown was to build together a task force that really starts to highlight respiratory infections, prevention, preparedness. And now we're in the stage, I'm hopeful, of resilience and recovery. And how do we bring in the incredible knowledge from virologists, epidemiologists, and business leaders to really understand what are the must-haves that we have to do to get people back to work and build into that safety and confidence. So we've recently released something called the WELL Health Safety Rating, which is really managing protocols across operations, maintenance, emergency recovery, and then what I think is the most important is stakeholder education and engagement. How do we really start building that level of confidence back with our occupants to give them the confidence so they can come back to healthy spaces? So I'm right at 10 minutes. I think I'm keeping the time going, and I will hand back to Matthias. So thank you all very much for listening.
Great, thank you, Marie Aguilar. We will come back to you later. Excellent presentation, excellent insights. I learned something new, like the sleep performance, measuring the sleep performance. I think that's a great idea. And it reminded me about an office I went to in the Philippines, where the guy who was running it said, I've tested it, it works. I put those guys on the night shift with a different light, and suddenly they told me, boss, I can't sleep anymore. So this is really serious stuff. And more about that later on. Our next speaker is Regina Ng. I met Regina many, many years ago on the way to China. Suddenly, we realized we're in the same flight. We are going to the same UNEP meeting on construction industry and reduction of carbon footprint. Was that 10 or 15 years ago, Regina? But yeah, great to have you here. She is the sustainability champion at IEN, the leading green building consultancy in Malaysia, together with Mitch as well, who is our next speaker. And Regina, looking forward to hear your case studies of the factory in the forest and a little bit of IKEA as well from Malaysia. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me on this town hall talk. And can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
so without further ado, I think I will just start on my presentation. To follow up on the previous speaker, I would like to use two of our case studies to illustrate that green and healthy buildings have a good ROI. So as we all know, energy efficiency, it is the lowest hanging fruit and it's good for the bottom line. And I would like to zoom into one of our projects, IKEA Cheras in Malaysia, as everybody knows IKEA. And this IKEA Cheras has been in operation since 2015, and at that time was actually the most efficient store in Southeast Asia. So it has achieved 58% energy saving compared to our average retail building in Malaysia, of which 49% comes from energy efficiency and 9% comes from PV. So the additional cost for implementing energy efficiency features in IKEA, it's about 2.5%, and the payback, it's only about 2 years. The remaining 9% that comes from PV, because IKEA Cheras has actually 1 megawatt peak of PV installed at the roof, it's about 1.2% additional cost, and the payback for the PV is about 14 years. So this goes back to show that energy efficiency is the lowest hanging fruit. If you go to any IKEA store, the energy efficiency features are not very visible because all the IKEA stores, they have to look the same. But one notable feature in IKEA Cheras is actually the provision of daylight through skylight, which helps to improve the look and feel of the space, and at the same time also reduces the lighting energy consumption. So to follow up on the previous speaker, health is wealth, and as we can see, the energy consumption, which is the operational cost of the building, is only a very small proportion of the company expenses, and salary is actually the biggest proportion. So our focus should really be to improve the productivity of the people to improve our bottom line. But we all know that productivity is very difficult to measure. But this has actually been done in a call center in Sacramento in the United States, because that can actually be measured based on the average handling time of each call. So the study actually showed that by providing people with a view to outdoor, the productivity actually increases by 6 to 7%. And if the call center was actually retrofitted to give everybody a view out, the payback to retrofit this space is very short and very justifiable. So this goes to show our innate need to connect with nature and outdoor, because just by having a window and a view to outdoors, our productivity can actually increase by quite a lot. So for example, in Japan, you can actually get a prescription from the doctor as an antidote to a hectic urban lifestyle known as forest bathing. So what is forest bathing? It's simply connecting with nature, simply being in nature, connecting with it through all our senses. But it's not all the time we have access to the forest. But what if we could actually bring the forest to our built environment, to where we work and where we live? And that's exactly what we have done with Paramit, a factory in the forest in Malaysia. As you can see, the before and the after. So we did this in Penang in Malaysia, where we brought the forest back to the Solars industrial area. And you can also see from Paramit, the building is really designed to have a visual and physical connection to nature everywhere, wherever you may be. You can be outside or inside the building. And there is also a roof garden and an outdoor courtyard where you can take a break, have your meals, or have a coffee. So you can see the old factory, which is really dull and gloomy, like a typical factory building with no view to outside. And the new factory in the forest, where there's abundant daylight and there's view to nature, even in the manufacturing area where people work. So another biophilic design in Paramit is the celebration of rain from nature, where the rainwater is actually designed to cascade down from the spouts to show a dramatic scene of waterfall along the glass wall that is separating the factory and the courtyard. So this actually heightens our awareness of being in the tropics, where we can see and hear and feel the rain. We have also implemented several passive and active design features, which I don't have time to go into details, but all these features actually help us to achieve 40% measured energy savings as compared to the old factory. Another feature in Paramit, which is to promote the well-being and health of the people inside the building, is putting the stairs as a centerpiece in the central atrium. So this actually encourages people to use the stairs rather than the elevator. So it is not surprising, looking at the building, that 90% of the people actually prefer the new factory to the old one, and citing contact with nature and a conducive work environment as the top reasons. And some of their comments are, it is the best place I've worked. The greenery is simply amazing. It gives us a peaceful feeling. So what is the ROI of a building like this? If we only look at the operational cost of the energy, the payback, it's 8 years. And that seems pretty high. But if we actually take the productivity of the people into consideration, recalling that just by giving people a window from the call center study, the productivity actually goes up by 6%. Then the payback is down to about 3 years. So surely by giving people a forest, the productivity will be much higher than 6%, and the payback will be less than 3 years. So to conclude, buildings have really a big impact, not only in terms of the operational costs, but also on the health and well-being and productivity of the people inside the building. And after all, we spend so much time of our time indoors, and giving the people a green building that takes the health and well-being of them into consideration is even better for the bottom line and has a short payback. So to put it simply, it's expensive not to go green. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and you can find more information on the video. Thank you very much.
All right, Regina, thank you for this fascinating presentation, the factory in the forest. Wouldn't we all love to work in a place like that? 90% people say it's better there. I mean, if you add employee retention and the cost of not having good employee retention, maybe the payback is already 0 years, because I know in Southeast Asia, that is one of the biggest issue, employee retention. Excellent. We can talk more about that later. Tom already posted the links earlier from Anne's presentation. You can copy them in the chat box and download them. Later on, towards the end of our whole event, we will actually post a link where you can download the free PDFs of all of these presentations. So we are going to look after you. Don't worry. Just hang on till the end. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my brother from another mother, let's put it like that, Mitch Gelber. We have no relation. I was blown away when I first met him in Malaysia, because outside of my little village in Germany, I'd never met anyone else with the name of Gelber. So Mitch Gelber has been in Malaysia for many, many years, like I used to be before I met my Filipina wife, and my heart took me to the Philippines. Mitch is the founder of YE Design Green Buildings. He is as well in the Malaysian GBI Technical Committee. He is very famous in Malaysia for his work and his detailed studies on cost of green building and return. Malaysia is perfect for that because the government introduced a tax incentive, so people have documented the details. And over to you, Mitch. We are looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks very much, Matthias. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect, perfect, yes.
All right, great. So welcome everyone, good evening. I'm gonna run through this quite quickly. There's a lot of information to cover in a short period of time. I'm Mitch Gelber, another Gelber. It's rare to get two of us on one Zoom call, but I think with some of my family here, we might have even more than two. I'm a technical committee member of Malaysia's Green Building Index. And GBI is a green building rating tool. And I've done a series of analysis based on the cost of green building. One of the things, like Matthias said at the beginning, that we find is that people have the impression that green buildings are expensive. And one of the reasons is that they tend to think about environmentally friendly systems as features and systems that can be purchased or bought, rather than looking at the comprehensive way of what and how we build. So GBI has been around since 2009, just celebrated its 10-year anniversary. There are currently 500 certified projects throughout Malaysia, and another 500 registered in planning or under construction. For those of you not familiar with Malaysia, we're a country about the size and population of Poland, or for the Americans in the room, we have slightly more people than Texas and about the size of New Mexico. Of these 500 projects, they come in all different shapes and sizes. Commercial buildings, I mean, you can't look at a building and say, oh, this is a green building. A green building at the end of the day is just like every other building. It's just been designed specifically according to principles for environmental friendliness and energy efficiency. So let's look at some of the metrics from GBI itself. There's over 24 million square meters of floor area certified. That's equivalent to about 62 Petronas Twin Towers in certified floor area in Malaysia. The average GBI certified project consumes 50% less electricity than the Malaysian average. The total greenhouse gas emissions from these 500 projects is about 1.3 million tons of CO2 a year. That's about 10% of all cars, equivalent to about 10% of all cars driving around KL. And in totality, represents a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions for Malaysia of about 0.5%, which is quite impressive when you think that GBI is all volunteer initiatives started by the Architects and Engineers Association of Malaysia. So you know, there's about 25 volunteer architects and engineers responsible for this initiative. So while this is just a drop in the bucket, it also goes to show what a small and dedicated group of people can achieve when they set out to it. And energy isn't the only benefit. The combined water savings from these 500 over projects is about 20 billion liters per year, which is about the daily domestic consumption of 260,000 Malaysians, just about 1% of the Malaysian population. There have been over 200,000 tons of construction waste recycled from GBI certified construction sites. That's enough to cover 110 football fields, roughly. So let's get to the meat of the issue. Are green buildings expensive? What we've been able to do at GBI is collect a data set from our certified projects to definitively answer this question. And what we found is that the average price tag of GBI certified building is less than 1% of the total construction cost. Where we get this data is in 2010, the government of Malaysia introduced tax incentives to GBI certified buildings. Currently, so basically, it's an incremental cost. Whatever the building owner spent to achieve the GBI certification, they could then claim back as a tax deduction. So we have about 100 over projects that submitted the statutory filings to the Malaysian Ministry of Finance, which are the source of this data. The overall cost for GBI certified buildings for commercial buildings ranges from 0 to 2%. For residential buildings, generally have less intensive mechanical systems. The overall cost is 0 to 1%. So, you know, for the visual thinkers among you, you can play Where's Waldo. The green stack of bills is the average green budget to achieve GBI certification. And just by way of comparison, for medium to large size construction projects, 5 to 10% of your construction budget is allocated for contingencies. So when we talk about are green buildings expensive, you know, it's well within the margin of error of the initial budget for the building. As your ambitions for GBI targets go up, then the cost and expenditure increases proportionately. So for gold and platinum buildings, the energy savings and also the expenditure increases, as would be expected. If we look at the breakdown of cost, the vast majority, as Regina showed earlier, goes to energy efficiency. Sustainable chillers, more efficient facades, and in some cases, solar panels. And so if we look back at the 15 projects that we showed you at the beginning, you can see here, this slide from Gregor's, the top end of the bar chart is the Malaysian average. The dark green is the actual consumption of energy from these 15 buildings. And the light green is the production of energy from solar panels, which we'll come back to at the end of the talk. So it also is just, in a way, if you take a step back and think about it, it's common sense. You know, one of the things that we're doing is increasing and improving the operating efficiency of our built environments and our buildings. So there's a direct and explicit correlation between efficiency and profitability. And it's important to talk out, like Anne-Marie was talking about earlier tonight, of some of the ways, of the qualitative ways that green building are beneficial. This data is not qualitative. This is direct return cash back into the pocket of the building owner. And it makes sense that as buildings improve efficiency, they improve directly their profitability. So again, based solely on energy savings, the average GBI certified building saves over 200,000 to 300,000 US dollars a year in ongoing operating costs. That breaks down to about 40 cents per square foot and an overall return on investment of 2.9 years to achieve for projects that have invested to achieve the GBI certification. So I think in the remaining time, I'm just going to go through one quick case study. This is my own sort of favorite example, but there are you know, many more that go towards the connection between good design and cost-effective design. Like I said earlier, really green buildings are just like any other building. If you have a building which is well designed, then it is almost by definition cost-effective. Where you run into trouble is when you start making decisions which are not based on common sense. It can be a slippery slope. So just by way of comparison, if we look at tropical buildings in Malaysia, the choice of what color you paint the outside of the building contributes to about 20 to 30% to the thermal performance of that building envelope. So a dark color building can require, plus minus 5% more energy than a white painted building. So let's compare that to the energy that can be generated by solar panels. On average, the energy generated by solar panels is about 2% of the overall building. Now, this ranges, the building that Regina showed earlier, it's more like 20%. But just for sake of comparison, GBI offers full credit of 5 points for buildings that achieve more than 2%. So based on the size of roof, the amount of energy you can generate, if you max out, you're looking at 10–20% energy, but the average is around 2%. So let's compare that then to the paint color, which can consume 5% more energy. So if you spend money to invest in solar panels, but then don't hit the low-hanging fruit that Regina was talking about, you're looking at spending money merely to offset the inefficiency of a dark-colored facade. The impact of the paint color, which has no cost, can be 2 to 3 times the energy impact of the active solar system. And paint color isn't the only thing that you can do. Passive design solutions are really numerous. A lot of these are specific to the tropics, but they're equally effective solutions in all climates. Things like paint color, the ratio and amount of glass you have on the facade, the tinting of the glass, external overhangs and shadings, building orientation, the layout of structural and lift cores to provide self-shading, daylighting, natural ventilation strategies. All of these passive design solutions are achievable with little to no additional cost and essentially can be designed in on the drawing board. And I think just as a way to wrap up, one of the things that I've also noticed is that these are all items that are free. They're implemented by way of good design. And one of the things about humans in general in decision-making processes is that items that are free often have the tendency to be left off the agenda. How many of us have been sitting in a meeting room and had the boss be put in front of them a decision that has no cost impact? This is something that a lot of these items, a lot of the low-hanging fruit is left on the tree, where a lot of the items that require investment are the ones that are brought to the fore. So just in conclusion, a lot of the items that deal with green buildings and cost, and a lot of the issues with cost are not actually related to the systems themselves or the design techniques themselves being expensive. A lot of it has to do with our own psychology. And we think about things like sprinklers, fire safety, escape stairs. No one really in the construction industry would ever say, oh, that building has a fire escape and a sprinkler. Oh, that must be a very expensive building. But we think about these environmentally friendly environmental performance as things that are value add, not intrinsic to good design and performance. So I think with that, let's open up for discussion, and I'll pass it back to Matthias. And I think here's a link to a book about GBI in Malaysia, and I'll add the link to the comments below. For anyone who's interested in more about GBI, please feel free to download and look into this book for more information. So thanks very much.
Great, thanks so much, Mitch. Again, excellent content. One of the main messages, there's so much low-hanging fruit that we don't pick. The free of charge options like the color of the walls, the passive shading, the building orientation, that's what people used to do. In the Philippines and Malaysia, Bahay Kubo or Malaysia Kampung House were designed to have all of that integrated. In the days when we didn't have air conditioning, people used those natural ways of cooling the building. And this is, I think, as well an interesting subject, because let me go straight into the questions here from the audience so we can tackle them. We have a couple of questions from a fellow German, Daniel. He was asking, the examples that have been presented were more focused on office building. What about residential, where people live in? Are there any examples what benefits we get in those buildings? And we had as well a question pre-conference, pre-event from Nepal. Our friend Govinda, she has the dream of building a green and sustainable building for herself, but she is worried about the cost. So maybe we can just look at residential briefly, share your comments, and how can we do residential green, healthy, and sustainable without incurring those costs that people are worried about. Who wants to start off? Regina? Any good examples of residential buildings that you've been working on where some of these features have been implemented?
Maybe I can jump in
Okay.
first.
Okay.
I mean, like you said, one of the things that we can draw from is our own histories. And every country, every climate is different. Every country has a different building history, a different set of materials, different cultural ways that we interact with our buildings. One of the best things that we can do is look back 100 years. Look back to when, you know, a lot of the problems that we have now with our buildings, their buildings are man-made, our problems are man-made. If we look back to the building stock of vernacular buildings, they give really precious insight into cost-effective and you know, effective solutions. In Malaysia, our residential houses are all predicated on natural ventilation. In temperate climates, you look at something like Victorian house, the ratio of windows to walls optimizes daylighting and ventilation in the summer, but then insulation in the winter. So no matter where in the world we live, looking back before the advent of mechanical systems and, you know, air conditioning, gives tremendous and low-cost solutions to these issues.
Okay, maybe I can chip into that as well. I think for residential, the same principles will also apply, especially after COVID, where a lot of us have actually experienced, you know, we have to stay at home for a long period of time as well. So I think the availability of landscape or nature around you is also really important. And access to, example, daylight or view is also really important. And in terms of energy efficiency, it's still the same. For example, in the tropics, we will definitely insulate our roof as well, choose a good glazing, and if you have to use air conditioning, then you choose a like energy labeled one. But another thing I think is quite important, as mentioned by Anna Marie as well, is the quality of sleep. So for example, the type of lighting you're using should be able to get you into that circadian cycle, so you are able to still be able to have a good quality of sleep at night as well. So I mean, that's just from my point of view, what I think we should do for any residential building as well. So.
Great, excellent. I actually built the maybe the first tiny home in Malaysia, and it was too hot. I wanted to show with passive design we can actually make it work without the need for big air conditioning. And I had to insulate my roof again with an insulation paint, and the temperature dropped by 2 Celsius. Anne-Marie, I want to pass on to you 2 additional questions. One was sent to us in advance, which is looking at, you touched already on the new standard that looks at the COVID risks. And we have a question here, how make those healthy buildings focus and give returns on the indoor air quality data, the moisture, microbial growth, total volatile organic compounds, and all the other metrics? What can we do there? And then another question that came in from Mario was, how can we work with governments, local authorities? And I think the WELL standard is doing quite some work in that area as well. How can we use the experience that we have to lobby governments to basically help putting this into place, particularly now in the context of the COVID risk?
Really great questions. So the first one I would respond to when we talk about mold and other toxins that are in the buildings. I think one of the reasons that WELL has been so successful is that we require performance verification before certification. So it's really important that we start measuring spaces. And this almost ties back to the original question that was talked about with residential and other typologies besides commercial office buildings. But we can definitely tell that if you have reduced CO2 levels, and I'm talking about schools, residential, office buildings, all the typologies that we're talking about, reduced CO2 has an impact on brain cognition and creativity. And exactly like Regina said, if you can start moving away from artificial light for hours on end, and school children, residential buildings, and offices start having more natural daylight, or a circadian lighting system, you can then see that the body knows that by the end of the day, it's time to start ramping down, as opposed to artificial light, which makes you feel like you're on all day for the same amount of energy. Going back to the discussion about the microbes again, I think we need to get to a position, and unfortunately, I think COVID-19 will encourage this more rapidly, is the requirement for ongoing monitoring. We're now seeing that, you know, viruses are in droplets that can be measured, and we will be starting to look at, you know, temperature thresholds of people coming into a building. CO2 will start to identify if spaces are too dense and we need to reduce them due to social distancing. But I think mold and mildew, especially if we're looking at, you know, numbers of properties that have been left vacant for 4 or 5 months, we need to understand the impact of mold or mildew or high humidity inside the ventilation system, so that when the buildings are reoperating again, that we're not expanding any sort of mold or mildew coming through those spaces. So I think that the requirement here is about testing and measuring what we currently have, and testing and measuring buildings that have been closed for a few months. And that's why I think the health safety rating is sort of a very mini version of the WELL building standard that allows folks to take that initial threshold step to say, what are the critical things that I need to be thinking about before I come back into a building? Back onto the government section, I mean, and I can see if I can find the link while we're still online, but we have had incredible success with the mayors in the US to try and help them deploy a level of health and safety across the government, which starts to build that sort of foundation platform that says, this is the starting point. And the WELL building standard, and we're not demanding that people go for certification, but if you can start using the criteria to really understand how to have that starting point, whether it's an education sector or government sector buildings, we can at least engage the audience and start the conversation. The other thing that we've done with this integration with the mayors in the US is that we've provided a 35% discount to education sector, government sector, and nonprofit, really to try and address the concerns of, you know, the price point and the economy of a post-COVID world. How can we start providing the guidance and the beginning steps to something that's affordable for the economy?
Great stuff. Thanks a lot, Anne-Marie. And I think this is as well what GSX wants to provide in the future, a global sustainability exchange relating to the question of Mario, to bring different stakeholders together and create a critical voice to really be able to influence, particularly as well in other parts of the world, like here, Southeast Asia, where we have quite a strong following, to really get changes done with the support of the marketplace, consumers, and governments at the same time. Mitch, I want to bounce this one question back to you that was mentioned earlier, how to build a sustainable home for an individual in a very low cost manner. A couple of more tips from you, please, for our friends from Nepal who want to do that. And Regina, we have another question here. How do you estimate the ROI on efficiency measures? I know that IEN does a lot of simulation pre-construction, so you have to give us some tips there. And our good friend Daniele from Malaysia as well, he has been asking, hey guys, great, but let's look at the facts. It's only a small percentage of buildings that are actually certified to green building standards. How can we ramp that up? And can we do something like Singapore where it's becoming mandatory? Is it good to have it mandatory? Will people just chase the certification rather than doing the right thing? So maybe Mitch, you can take that question on as well. And we'll start off with you first, Mitch, and then pass over to Regina for the prediction on what return we get from the efficiency measures we're planning at the design stage.
So the question about the low-cost house is a good one. I mean, at the end of the day, houses, I would say, are quite personal. So I will give a sort of a general answer. And one thing that in my experience has been very important. There are a lot of things that are effective about saving energy, having a more productive, a healthier house. But one of the things that's really critical, and it sort of should go without saying, but it doesn't, is that for something to be green, it has to work. For something to, it doesn't matter how inexpensive something is, it doesn't matter how much energy something saves, if it doesn't make the building better, then it's not green. And this is something that we run into all the time. My wife came home from the office last year and said, oh, our building went green. Now when we go down for lunch, we have to wait 25 minutes for the elevator because to save energy, they programmed the elevator to run slower. Which is true. I mean, they can save 20% electricity, but they in the process completely break the building. So a lot of the things that we look at in terms of making a building more efficient is to also think of it in the same line as making the building better. How are we improving things? It's important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. The question about green building ratings is a very, very good one. Green building ratings are not the end game here. Green building ratings are a tool. Every country in the world is in a different situation in terms of their economic situation, their cultural situation, their political situation, their physical environment. And so, the example raised about Singapore is a very good one. Singapore is very, very efficient and centralized government control. Their green building rating tool is run by the government. They are not recognized by the World Green Building Council because for the specific reason that the World Green Building Council recognizes that these tools should not be confused with regulation. These tools are voluntary initiatives to try to drive the market, to try to increase awareness, and they are designed, when well designed, they're designed to work in conjunction with regulation from authorities. So that's the reason why the WGBC doesn't recognize government-linked tools, because if the example is, and I can bring up a more specific example from Malaysia, the government of Malaysia has implemented since 2014 mandatory energy efficiency requirements for all new buildings and all renovated buildings. There are 13 states in Malaysia. Only 4 of those 13 states have adopted those changes to the building bylaw. Of those 4 states, I would say 0 have the capacity to effectively implement those changes. So and instead, what happens is that because GBI, those numbers that I presented earlier are very impressive. Look at everything we've achieved. The government looks at those numbers and say, oh, why do we have to reinvent the wheel? Let's just adopt GBI as our environmental standard, and there we'll go. Well, at the end of the day, we all have our own role to play. It is a slippery slope in a lot of cases. And again, this is different for different countries. What works in Singapore is not going to work in Malaysia. What works in the US is not going to work in Canada, and vice versa. But making something mandatory, you have to approach it in a way that works for the industry, that works for the country. These tools are, like GBI, are designed to be voluntary. They're designed to play a specific role. If they are not used properly, I mean, again, I took out this slide, but it's my favorite slide. GBI is a tool, green buildings are tools like a hammer is a tool. So you can take a hammer and you can use it as a hammer is designed to hammer a nail. You can also take that same tool and, you know, smash a car window, you know, smash a car to pieces. These are tools. What matters at the end of the day is how we use them. And the problem that we have, you know, that's specific to Malaysia is that a lot of times when the government interjects using this tool that's been designed to be mandatory, that's been designed to be industry-led, professional-led, and then applies it across the board, the chance for success, the chance for proper usage of this tool has a substantial decline. It's you know, it's a long answer. It's not a very succinct answer, but you know, the complexity of these issues, especially when we look at them internationally, become quite formidable. Okay, sorry, go on.
Maybe before I pass on to Regina, Gene Harn made an interesting comment. He worked in Singapore a long time. Hi, good to see you there. And he said there is a recognition from the World Building Council for one of the voluntary systems that they have. So I think that's quite interesting. But the mandatory one is maybe not recognized because it's too much government related. We have as well a couple of more questions coming in. I'll try and get back to them. Regina, can you give us a quick answer on this ROI calculation in the design phase? And then I have a good question from Greg and 2 or 3 others. We'll try and ask them, and then we have to wrap up after that. But before that, I want to get to a poll as well.
Yeah. Okay. The simple answer would be the design optimization actually happens on the computer. So what we do is we do a lot of computer simulations where we would analyze, for example, changing a glazing from a single glazing to a double glazing. What would be the energy that could be saved, because you will be reducing the cooling load from the air conditioning. And from that, we will also find what is the additional cost of upgrading from, example, say the single glazing to the double glazing. And we use that to find what is the ROI. And we do that for the different energy efficiency features. So we have something like, you can call it a shopping list, where we would find the ROI of each feature. And then from then on, we will present it to the client and we will see which one has the most impact and which are the items that have an acceptable ROI to the client as well. So that's how we would do that at the design phase.
Great. Mitch, Regina, and Anne-Marie, do you all have another 15 minutes time? We still have a lot of questions to cover. If it's okay with you guys, I would like to continue. I see the nodding of all 3 of you. That's great. Before we continue, I would like to ask Tom to launch a poll, because one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to check today whether, what is your opinion, whether we should potentially extend it to 90 minutes, keep it 60 minutes, should we run 1 month, 1 event per month or 2 events per month? Here you have multiple choice. Can you please let us know your vote? Because that is important for us to design our future events. It would be great if we get quite some of you to vote here. Then we can take your views into consideration. We've got about 30% of you that have voted so far. Maybe we'll at least wait till we have 50% of the votes in.
So I just wanted to, while people are filling this out, knock on something that Regina just said, is that you know, the ROI for different items also varies widely depending on the variables of each project. So it's not just that if you have something that works for one project, it'll automatically work for the next project. It's not that you know, something that you do that makes one building efficient is necessarily replicable in the next building. One of the things that makes this issue complicated is that there are very few things that are designed and built like buildings. In a lot of, like I said earlier, when you think about procurement as maybe going to the store, picking something off the shelf, having a variety of options in front of you, well, buildings are designed and built to be bespoke, and they respond to not just where they are, but who's building them, who's occupying them, what type of building it is, and all of these variables add complexity. So a building that's been designed to be very efficient for Auckland, New Zealand, may not be efficient if it's then applied in a tropical country, tropical climate. But moreover than that, a building that's been designed on the right side of the street may not be operate as efficiently as a building on the opposite side of the street if those buildings are occupied by different people, or designed built by different contractors, or built in a different way. There's so much variation and diversity within our buildings and our environment that it's hard to apply these systems with a broad stroke, a broad brush. And so the opportunities for mistakes are tremendous. And in construction, mistakes are costly. So while the data clearly says that, shows that these buildings are not expensive, when you have a negative experience, when you have a poorly designed and built building, the costs can escalate tremendously. But again, that's true of all buildings. If you build in a way where the construction is not properly managed, if the building is not properly designed, the number one result of those inefficiencies are your costs escalate. And so that's the same with green buildings. A well-designed and well-managed green building is very cost-effective. A poorly designed and poorly built, poorly managed green building could be very expensive. I mean, it's the same with all buildings. So
great input, Mitch. Thanks so much. The results are quite clear. You prefer the Zoom meeting rather than the webinar, where we can see one another, interact with one another. One event per month is great. So we will take that into consideration. And I would like to as well just highlight for you, we have the next event planned on the 19th of November. Tom, can you please send the registration link? You can already sign up now. We have 3 amazing case studies that we will present there. One is United World College Singapore, the school that saved 7% of construction costs with radical green innovation. It's one of the most amazing buildings I've ever seen, and we will learn from them how did they achieve that. Then the world's highest LEED certified factory in 2016 when it was built. Surprise, surprise, a garment factory from Bangladesh. We will hear about them. And then we have the Candida building that is according to the Living Building Challenge. Mia will present that from Skanska. So it will be an amazing event again with rich case studies that we can learn from. Sign up on the link that Tom is sharing. Anne-Marie shared as well the link about the work they are doing with the mayors. Let me continue with 2 or 3 quick more questions. We have Victor asking about ESG. How does green and healthy buildings link with ESG scores? Maybe I can give a very quick answer myself on that, because I'm the ESG advisor to the Philippine Stock Exchange. One of the most famous ESG rating agencies, there are various of them. This is the only area they actually focus on when it comes to the real estate sector, to my surprise, opportunities of green and healthy buildings. They give their major score on that area. This is MSCI. Various other rating agencies, they focus very heavily on this. So this is very, very important for real estate companies to get this right. Otherwise, their ESG ratings will be much lower and less money will flow into them. Then we have a question, what would be a good indicator for a residential building in terms of measuring the returns from healthy buildings? Maybe Anne-Marie, you can quickly respond to that. And then we have the a question from Greg. How do we include climate change and climate change considerations into both the design decisions that we are making now, our KPIs for green and healthy buildings, and as a return on investment consideration based on, you know, if we don't get it right by 2030, we have a point of no return and a lot of costs will hit us. I'm not sure who will take that question on. That's a macro complex question, but first over to you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Matthias. I mean, I definitely agree. Two of those points that you mentioned, obviously there's another tool out for ESG, which is the GRESB rating system. And we've definitely seen over the last 3 years, real uptake in the performance of healthy and sustainable buildings having greater long-term value in the investor chain. So I think now, especially in a post-COVID world, we will definitely see direct alignment between increased building value and sustainability and health implementation. Going back to the residential question, that's been really interesting for us. We've definitely been noticing, and this is again going back 18 months, so pre-COVID, that buildings that were promoting healthier indoor air quality due to better ventilation and filtration systems, as well as the design of spaces that are using non-toxic materials. So that would include things like low VOC, non-formaldehyde furniture. We were definitely seeing, especially in the Asia market, an increased cost of that building, whether it was being sold or rented. So an increased ROI based on the cost or the rental of the building based on its healthy criteria. Now that again was pre-COVID, so I can only imagine that buildings now that are going to be advertised as having been designed with a better ventilation system, better filtration management, and low to zero toxic materials would also be able to show that as a substantial ROI.
Oh yeah, I think especially in this time where everybody is trying to get their head around. My friend in Germany told me, his wife is a teacher, every 20 minutes she needs to measure CO2 levels, document them, and if CO2 levels are above a certain level, they have to flush the window and get fresh air in. So if you have a green and healthy building, you know, people will feel much safer, and there will be a lot less costs in retrofitting all of these issues now that are required. So who wants to take on the climate change question? Maybe Mitch, one for you? Or am I putting you on the spot now?
What was the question? You want me to solve climate change on a Zoom call?
How we can include it into our design considerations now. We have the net zero carbon strategy and the ROI calculation. We will have huge costs, especially for low-lying, close to sea level real estate. There's already some calculations by investment firms that are discounting if your property is close to the sea level because of climate change impacts that we might face 10 years down the line. So this is already real, but how can we build it into the work that we are doing now?
I mean,
quick answer.
Well, I actually wanted to touch on something that Anne-Marie just mentioned, which is that there's the data that the green residential buildings have a higher selling price. This is a way of avoiding your question, Matthias. But I think this is actually something that is much more interesting for this particular conversation, because these are numbers that are bandied about quite regularly, that you know, green buildings have higher rental prices. You know, you hear in Kale a lot, grade A office buildings can no longer be marketed as grade AAA without being green rated. But something that just occurred to me is that this sort of line of thinking is sort of counterproductive, because it feeds this narrative that green buildings are somehow more valuable, more costly, and it's you know, again, a lot of the challenges that we face are not technical challenges. They are social, cultural, you know, psychological challenges. If people think that green buildings are, or these things are expensive, or they're valuable, or they associate these strategies with value, then it's only then logical that something that is value is more expensive. And clearly, that's this is valuable, but it's not valuable because it is necessarily more expensive. It's valuable because it's a better way to build and an imperative way to build. So again, to answer your question on climate change, for me, I go back to fire code. 100 years ago, and in some places in the world still, people are, buildings are killing people with fire, they're killing people with earthquake. And over the last 100 years, we've developed systems and strategies and good design practice to deal with these issues. And our approach to building and climate change is no different than these challenges that we faced in the past, except on the issue of scale. Because this is not a fire that affects one building, one city or one community. This is a fire that affects the entire planet. So if we look at how our buildings evolved over the last 100 years to incorporate things like fire safety, earthquake safety, seismic safety, that's essentially what we're talking about. We're talking about moving the industry to a point where these ways of building are not seen as something which is new or unique. They're built into every single building. We don't think about these fire safety as something which is extraordinary. And in 10, 20 years, we won't think about these green building strategies and good practice as something that's extraordinary. They'll be prerequisite. The only question in terms of climate change is, will it happen soon enough to mitigate the impact? The answer to that is no. It's gonna, things are gonna get worse, but our buildings will evolve. Our buildings will become more efficient, and our buildings have to become part of the solution.
Thanks, Mitch. We have to cut it here. I would just say that big cities are making net zero carbon requirements 2030 for new buildings, 2050 for existing buildings. If you don't do it now, your retrofitting cost will go through the roof. And Mitch is right, it will be the natural thing to do. Anne has to leave us. Thanks so much, Anne. We will just do an exit poll to help you with follow-up. We will have as well, Tom is launching that just now. Tom will as well paste the link where you can download all the presentation slides from today's event. We will send them as well in the follow-up email in case you miss out now. What follow-up interest do you have in terms of, getting onto the GSX newsletter or anything else? Please let us know. We really would love to see you again at our next town hall next month with all those amazing case studies. And while this poll is ongoing, I will as well try to follow up on some of those great questions and comments that you guys made that we didn't have the time to really refer to. Maybe we'll come up between the GSX team and the speakers, if they're available, with a video response to some of those additional questions. That could be fun. And Joyce, as people fill in the poll, can we ask you for some closing statement? Joyce is the founder and CEO of GSX. The fact that we are here is thanks to her. Tom, who has been working in the background, helping me facilitate this event, is a management team member as well as Jim Buck, whom you can see on the screen smiling at us. And yeah, Joyce, over to you. And thanks to all the speakers for the amazing content. Thanks to our audience. Thanks to the Gelber family. Put a big smile on my face. And handing over to Joyce and saying goodbye and see you again in next month's town hall.
So, hi everyone. What I got out of this session, that it's clear that we have the statistics and the proof that building green has tremendous benefits to the bottom line, as well as the health and wellness of its building's occupants. But it's also very clear to me that nature is so powerful and has so many of the answers that we seek, and that we can study biomimicry and things like that to include in our buildings. And it's time to share that knowledge. It's time to increase engagement with your community and share this stuff, because it's innovative, it's exciting, it's fun. It's great stuff, not only for business, but for the planet. And I really want to say a big thank you to Anne, Regina, and Mitch. We had approximately 256 professionals registered on LinkedIn for the event. And I think this certainly speaks to the credence of what GSX is trying to do, which is trying to build a really strong community. We want to connect, discover, source, and profit from all of this. So thank you for everyone for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you at the next town hall.
Thank you, and bye-bye. Good night. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Matthias. Great stuff.
Thanks a lot.